You will never be good enough for the wrong person. So when people do not see your value, it's not about I'm not good enough, I'm not this. No, they're not for you. And we've got to learn to accept that and not internalize rejection, not internalize the fact that this person cannot step up to the table.
Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Demina Millard. I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida, an anxiety and fear relief coach, and an individual who's super passionate about helping others grow. I am back today with a video giving my review of a recent professional development event that I went to. The event was part of a tour called the Best of Me Tour, presented by Stephan Labossiere, who has a YouTube channel, website, content, merch. He is a certified life and relationship coach, and he actually presented in Miami, Florida, and essentially had an event where he talked about a lot of the topics that he is super passionate about, to include really helping people overcome different obstacles and barriers as they are working towards building romantic relationships and also understanding the dating process. And so I really wanted to attend this event to just identify some additional information that I could also share from my perspective as a licensed mental health counselor, as a coach, and also as someone who wants to help other individuals, including Black women and women who identify under the BIPOC umbrella, to understand how to better navigate relationships, especially because relationships can very much affect so many parts of our lives. And relationships can also affect our health, not just our mental health, our mood, but also our physical health. And so, really, today I wanted to just present some of the main points that I took away from the event and to share that in hopes that somebody will be able to have a part of it really speak to you today. Maybe there might be a point that I may talk about, right, that I learned from the event that Stephan put on, that may help somebody that you know, right? A family member, a friend, a coworker. So definitely take notes and feel free to share the video. Also, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And in the show notes, not only will I be dropping the most recent video that Stephan uploaded that is one of my favorites, but also you'll be able to find information on how to contact me and just additional resources. So, without further ado, we're going to get into the top points. So, there are 3 points in particular that I really wanted to dig into that I thought would be super duper helpful. So, the first tip is the importance of recognizing interdependence within relationships. So, interdependence is essentially the midway point for being connected to other people. Okay, so follow me. You've got independence, and then you've got codependence, and then in the middle, right, bringing those two together, you've got interdependence, which is defined as dependence of two or more people or things on each other. And what you may find is that if you've done any kind of personal work, or if you've probably had any conversations with friends or family members, is that you may find that as it relates to relationships, not just romantic, could be platonic, could be professional, but you may identify that in certain ways you may prefer to be more independent, right? More just focused on how you can meet your own needs, or there may be times when you may be a little bit more on the codependent range, right, where you may be super duper people pleasing or really super reactive to how other people respond to things that you say or do, and tweak your behavior as such. And so the reality is that balance, to a large degree, as much as you can possibly add in your life, can be super helpful with regard to helping you balance how you move through relationships, what you accept, what you pay attention to, and really the best way to either behave, right, or whatever action you want to take that's going to be ultimately best for your health. Okay. And so I really like that Stefan talked about this point in the Best of Me tour event, because I don't know, especially as not just a mental health professional, but as a person, if people are really too aware of the term interdependence and that it's okay to want to depend on others. It's okay to want to receive support from others. It's also okay to want to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. It's also okay to want to say no to others and to make things happen for yourself. In addition to both of those points, it's also okay to know that there's an ebb and a flow, right? Um, Again, having that balance. Sometimes the reality is that we are going to need people, right? We're human beings. We were raised in some sort of a community, and the reality is that we don't do life alone. We don't do everything alone, right? Even if I'm thinking about going to the grocery store. When you go to the grocery store, the items within the grocery store are coming from a lot of different places. So if there were, how would I say it? Let's say if all of the places that brought in the different food items in the grocery store decided not to work together and decided to work independently, I would imagine that would mean you would have to go to one place to get meat, one place to get dairy products, one place to get cold cuts, one place to get frozen goods, right? So the importance of support and understanding the balance of it and how it can be beneficial, but also recognizing that there may be times when you might have to do something alone or you may want to do something alone, and that's okay, especially with regard to not just relationship with others, but also relationship with yourself. The second point that I wanted to talk about is how he talked about how to handle ghosting. So, for any of you that don't know what ghosting means or the action of it, uh, of course, in this day and age, with regard to dating and interacting with other people, a lot of individuals may communicate online via the internet. And so, because there are so many different modes of communicating and interacting with people, and there's such an increase in being able to connect and communicate with people, sometimes people may either forget to write back to you, they may just not write back to you for whatever reason, you may not hear from them. And what ends up happening is that in and of itself can cause someone whose goal is to date or whose goal is to who has a goal to meet other people, it can cause them to really feel frustrated, annoyed, uh, disappointed, to the point where it may kind of take them out of the game as far as being in the headspace to show up in the dating, show up with regard to dating and knowing, understanding, meeting people uh, with with healthy intention. Because sometimes, right, if we have a goal for something, if we continue to feel defeated, then we may just not care anymore. We may just say, well, to heck with what the other person wants. I just want this and this, and then that's that. I don't even care, which really does not benefit relationship overall, community overall. Okay, really understanding how we can really find healing and growth in relationship and not just toxicity or negativity. And so some of the things that Stephan had shared was just the importance of recognizing that you are going to interact with people that are going to be emotionally present. You're also going to interact with people who are going to be emotionally, who are going to lack emotional presence. You're going to be interacting, what you can expect, right, is that you're going to be interacting with people who communicate in all kinds of ways. People who may be more direct, some people who may be more passive, people who may be more assertive and may be more comfortable and understanding of their own needs, not only understanding their own needs, but understanding how to deliver their needs in either verbally or non-verbally in a way that can speak to you and make sense to you. Why do I say it like that? I say that like that because everyone is on their journey in one way, shape, or another of growing and understanding how to communicate what it is that they want while at the same time showing respect to others. And of course, what you may find is that there are people who are going to show up like that, who are working on showing up like that, and people who are not going to show up like that. And because you have a goal of getting to know people, knowing yourself, really just getting an understanding of dating and the process of it, something that's super important to remember is that there are going to be people who are going to ghost you. And guess what? You might ghost people too. You might not intend to, right? It might not be ideally what you want to do, but it's something that could happen. So it's important just to remember that that is a possibility. Now, on the other hand, with regard to you decreasing or putting in some kind of strategy to try to decrease the chances of ghosting happening, one thing that Stephan mentioned is that when you start to communicate with someone, right? So whether it's through a dating app or whether it's in person, right? However you meet them, because the reality is that you can meet people in person. I know it still happens. And so, with that said, one of the things that he mentioned is to say to the person, of course, in an organic way, of course, but really mentioning to them, hey, if there's any point in us communicating and you're just not feeling it, you're just, it's just not working for you, just let me know. No harm, no foul. And the way that he presented it, especially from a mental health perspective for me, as I interpreted that and took in that information, I really, really liked that just because again, we do live in a point in time where there are so many extra ways to communicate, and yet it can sometimes decrease people's chances of directly communicating. With all of that said, practicing how you want to communicate with others, even in the dating stage, is so important because what you're doing is you're setting a stage. You're designing, co designing how you want the dating experience to be. And sometimes what can happen is that people, for whatever reason, we may be so eager to want something, right? I want a relationship. I want a partnership. I want a child that we may throw out the other super duper important building blocks to ensure that when you do get those things, a relationship, a partnership, a child, whatever it is, that it's able to withstand the test of time and that you really build such a solid foundation, not just for you, but also foundation for the partnership that you're wanting to build, the environment that you're wanting to be in, even if it's just a few dates or even if it's just a couple of conversations. And also really challenging in a healthy way, challenging the other person to see if they can meet your need of wanting to communicate and your need of a certain amount of transparency, right? And so just something to consider, especially with regard to ghosting. The last thing to remember on that is to the best of your ability, please, please, please try not to let disappointment or defeat take you out of the game. And I'll be talking about that a little bit on this third point, this last point. But it's really important to, if at all possible, not let the emotion of defeat or feeling discouraged to stop you completely, forever in your tracks. Okay. Especially if you want to work towards a goal. Because for anyone who's ever worked towards a goal consciously, there's a natural process to achieving goals. There's a natural process to working towards goals, to include experiencing defeat, experiencing disappointment in some way, shape, or form. So, all of that is a part of the process, but it doesn't mean that that's where the process stops for you. With that said, going to the third point that Stephan brought up in the Best of Me tour, he talked about using intuition and mindfulness to prevent and to manage dating fatigue. So, okay, so I'm at the event, right? He's making his points, he's talking, and it was actually kind of interesting because what he had the audience do is he had the audience just throw out different topics that he or that we were interested in hearing, right? So people talked about various topics, but to my memory, this particular topic was something that he brought up, which is the dating fatigue. And I don't know if I had heard of this phrase before. I might have, but it's been a while. But when he said it, I was like, okay, okay. So, of course, as he was talking a bit more on the topic, uh, my understanding of it was that it kind of reminded me of burnout. So let's say professionally, right? You're working all of these hours, right? You're expending, you're using all of this energy, but you're not recouping the same amount of energy that you are using, which is making you feel less and less and less energized, probably more and more irritable, more and more discouraged, sad, angry, annoyed, short tempered, right? Pick your poison, pick whichever one you want to use. But taking that concept and relating it to dating fatigue, he was talking about it from the perspective of how sometimes we may, as people, have certain ideals, how we see things. And one of my most recent episodes in my podcast, Grow Through This, which you'll also see the link in the show notes, I talk about feeling, I can't remember the name of the podcast topic in this moment, but I really talk about the importance of, I really talk about the importance of staying connected to yourself to prevent a certain kind of fatigue, especially as it relates to feeling defeated. Because there's a difference between experiencing defeat and also experiencing being defeated and then experiencing the emotion of defeat. As people, we can very naturally go through various defeats in our life, right? So, what is another word for defeat? Failure. Sometimes, depending on the type of person that you are, that may not be a word in your vocabulary. It might not be a word that you want to acknowledge. It might not be something that you even want to talk about. Or maybe failure, defeat is something that you might use to propel you, to push you forward, to help keep you motivated towards a goal, right? Towards working on what you want. With that said, the reality is that what can happen a lot of times is that we can experience a certain amount of defeat, and sometimes those defeats can feel like gut punches. You're just getting punched, you're just getting knocked down. And sometimes people may not feel like they're able to catch their second wind, to get a reprieve, to get a sip of water, to get a break. And with regard to dating, getting to meet people, socially, being in spaces where you're getting to introduce yourself to people and just make relationships, something something that's super important to remember is that there can be times when the ideal that we may have in our mind is, I want a partner in 6 months and that's what it's going to be, or I want to be married, or I want this, or I want that related to relationship, right? So it's a how would I say, I guess the phrase that's coming to mind is like a status symbol, right? Like, I want to be able to write on my social media accounts that I'm in a committed relationship within the next 3 months. So I'm going to be searching this, that, right? Whatever you may do to make that happen. But kind of going back to what I talked about in the second point is that it's so important to remember to create a solid foundation, as solid as you can, in a relatively healthy, realistic, and doable way, to make sure that whatever those status symbols that you want, whatever those goals that you want related to dating, that you can achieve those, and that you can achieve them in a way that's going to be healthy for you in the long run. Okay? In the long run. Health equals wealth, people. So, with that said, with regard to dating fatigue, some of the ways to prevent dating fatigue includes using mindfulness and also using intuition to help you stay connected moment by moment as you're interacting with another individual. Now, the importance of mindfulness and intuition is that these are actually tips that you can use not just with regard to dating, you can use in any relationship, you can use in any setting. Because the reality is that sometimes what can happen is our brain is connected to our body. Our body is our first home. And so sometimes what can happen, and I don't know if this is for you, feel free to write it in the comments, is that sometimes we may be disconnected from our thoughts or our minds for whatever reason, and yet our body might send us signals. What do I mean by this? Sometimes when people feel uncomfortable, they might feel a little shaky. Sometimes they might be sweating a little bit more, hyperventilating, kind of breathing like that, and maybe the hairs on your arm just stand up. Something feels off. Or maybe you are around someone or you're in an environment where you feel super duper relaxed and calm. You can't really pinpoint it maybe, but you just feel super duper relaxed and calm. Part of that is the fact that your body is paying attention and your mind, right? You're paying attention to your surroundings. Sometimes we can do that consciously, and sometimes it can be subconsciously, and sometimes it can kind of be a mix of both. So the point of all of that is with regard to dating, right? You're spending energy, you're getting to know people, you're putting yourself in different social settings, you're communicating more with people, you're using energy. And so it's very important for you, as much as you can, to stay connected to yourself and connected and being mindful, AKA being present in the moment, and just paying attention to how you feel when you're communicating with that person. Text, voice message, FaceTime, video call, or even if you're in person, like face to face with the person, and paying attention to how you feel. And even when you leave, right? Do you feel energized? Do you feel depleted? Do you feel tired? Do you feel sad? Do you feel happy? Do you feel joyful? Very important to remember this because, again, if your goal is something long term, right, like partnership or something of that nature, and even if it's just to have fun, even if it's just to get to know people, every moment counts. So every moment when you feel uplifted is an additional point where you're feeling uplifted. Whereas every moment where you're feeling sad or depressed or discouraged, that's adding to you feeling discouraged. So it's almost like a game, right? How uplifted can you be? Knowing that we experience both types of emotions, right? Positive emotions and emotions that are negative, or sometimes people may feel uncomfortable with them, right? Not all people. But the reality is that it's almost like really you're designing how you want your life to be. You're designing each interaction. You're considering what works for you, what doesn't, and you're tweaking it as needed. And then also just the importance of talking to people who can help you stay accountable to your dating goals or your goals of getting to know people, meeting people, um, just so that you can constantly be reminded of your worth and at the same time understand what's happening in realistic, like real time. What do I mean when I say that? So let's say there's an individual that you have connected with. Maybe you met them in the grocery store, because it happens, and the individual is physically attractive to you, right? Super duper, super duper physical chemistry. And yet, as you interact with them, you talk to them, you're sending text messages with, to them, or communicating in person or even telephone, something just is not really doing it for you with regard to the intellectual part of the connection, right? So maybe they are just not as well read as you are. Maybe the type of conversations that you're used to having are just conversations that they're not on the same level. And you may kind of feel bummed out, and yet you might be like, but they're so attractive. Now, if you are talking to someone who is really paying attention to what you're saying and can help you understand, hey, something's not clicking all the way together on this, right? The person likely may share with you and say, okay, well, it sounds like you're physically attracted to them, but it sounds like intellectually you all are not on the same page. Now, if we go back to the importance that each one of us have different needs and desires, for you, if you have a need and desire to want to have frequent conversation with the person that you are in relationship with, maybe want to read books together, maybe want to go to different events where you can always be talking and having commentary, right? And just sharing in that way verbally. If the person that you're starting to date or starting to interact with, if you're recognizing that they're not even able to do that on a beginning level with you, it may not be a fit. And if it's not a fit in the beginning, it may not be a fit moving forward. Now, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but the reality of what I'm sharing is if you're being mindful, if you're using your intuition, it's important to recognize that sometimes, right, if something is not if something does not feel completely settled within you, it may benefit you to look into it and to dig a little bit deeper to see if something can be changed to accommodate your needs or if it's just not going to work at all, right? So if we go with that example of that person that you found interesting, or excuse me, that you found physically attractive, but just intellectually you're not on the same page, right? I'm not necessarily saying, okay, cut it off. But what I'm saying is if you have a therapist, if you have a life coach, if you have a solid group of friends or one friend, someone who you really trust their opinion and you know that they are giving it for your betterment, right? Really consider that and consider how you would like to have conversation with the person that you're getting to know, right? Maybe you want to bring up a topic and see if there's something on that particular topic where they have something more extensive to share, and then go from there with it, right? So take your time, pay attention to how your mind and your body feels, and also remember to have fun. Remember to be safe. And just one last piece of information that I wanted to share with you is that you are capable of designing a life that actually fits your needs, fits your desires, fits what you want. It is not always easy to do it. It takes time, but if you stay the course, you can absolutely design a life, design relationships, design and work on your health in ways that can actually uplift you, even in the midst of trial, even in the midst of stress. So don't give up. Anyway, that is the end of this video. Thank you so much for being here. Again, take a look at my show notes and be well, be blessed. Bye.